Today, we are diving into part 3 of our 5-part series titled Finding Cohesion, which is all about navigating workplace personalities, from managing our resources through to providing feedback, all the way to different communication styles. But today we're on part 3, and we're focusing on being more than mediocre, both for ourselves as leaders and developing our team to not just meet expectations, but to exceed expectations by cultivating a drive for excellence. And the big caveat here is that we can do that without breaking the bank. I know that budgetary constraints are something that's top of mind for a lot of leaders at the moment, along with a lot of employees who are saying, hey, the cost of living has increased, and there are different things that are motivating me or maybe not motivating me. So we're going to get into some tips and tricks today, and work through a little case study in a way that we've identified different ways to motivate our team members without having to provide a huge raise or sign that big check. There are ways that we can connect with our team to show that they're valued and appreciated, to acknowledge their contributions, and to help them strive for excellence. So that's what we'll be getting into today. As for anybody that remembers and has watched our first part of this 5-part series, which was all about managing our resources, we understood in that first part the importance of understanding what our resources are, and that resources vary from person to person, and the value that we put on these resources also varies from person to person. And while we as leaders are over here juggling all of these different resources, whether that be time, budget, people, our knowledge, our energy, the rest of our team is also doing the same. So it's really important to understand that some of the resources that we might hold to be most valuable, somebody else might not. And so we need to keep this top of mind as we look to understanding what motivates each individual. Now, if you didn't catch the first part, feel free to go back to our community. You can join for free, and you can watch the replay at any time. It's available in our resource hub. So know that that's available to you to really dive in and understand what these resources mean and how you utilize them and leverage them innately and as for your team. But in shelving that for a moment and keeping it in the back of our mind, we're looking at how we then carry these resources forward to both incentivize and motivate our team members, and sometimes ourselves when maybe we're having a day where we just don't feel like showing up. How can we find that intrinsic drive to meet expectations, exceed expectations, and make our contributions fruitful every single day? When we think about, before we get into the solutions, when we think about why teams might lose motivation or settle for mediocrity, there are 3 big categories that we recognize. Granted, we understand that there are a number of other elements that might come into play. However, these 3 come up time and time again with our clients. The first is that their current resources aren't supported, or the resources that they believe to be most valuable aren't acknowledged on an individual basis. The second reason is that the individuals feel either underutilized or underappreciated, right? So that goes back to having their resources not be acknowledged, whether that's time, their contributions, what have you, but they feel as though as an individual contributor, their skills are underutilized and their contributions are underappreciated. And third and finally, they don't have any goals driving them to do better. They might show up, they might do the bare minimum, they might sneak under that bare minimum, right? But there isn't a goal that they can clearly identify to say, I'm striving for this, or I'm looking to achieve this based on the resources that they value most. Now, this also comes down to goals that are set by both the leader and the employee, goals and objectives that are set by the organization, and a clear vision so each employee knows how they contribute to that overall vision, to the big picture. So with this, we've really summarized it, put a pretty bow on it here to say one of the main causes of mediocrity within a team is that employees and team members can't link their why with their work. And I don't mean why as in purpose all the time, because our why as human beings can fluctuate. So depending on the season of life we're in, depending on what we want to achieve, milestones we're looking to celebrate, like a wedding perhaps, right? We might change our why from month to month, from quarter to quarter, from job to job, so that our why can look like supporting a lifestyle, right? I come into work because I have a lifestyle and my job pays the bills and I like that. So that's why I meet or exceed expectations, because I know that it can continue to support my lifestyle. Maybe they're looking for financial security in whatever way that means for them. So increasing that financial security or maintaining that status quo. Perhaps the why is coming in for a learning opportunity. They want to understand more about a certain industry, about a certain job, role, function. And so this opportunity provides them the ability to enhance their skills. Or maybe they're so connected to the impact of the work that that's what drives them to show up every day, to do their best work, and to be committed to a team, to the organization, and to the overall vision that everybody is trying to achieve. Now, I'd like to show you how this plays out in an organizational setting through explaining what happened with one of our clients. We'll call them Company X, but essentially Company X is currently going through our Spark training program. Now we have their executive leadership team sitting in on this program. And so the CEO, COO, and CFO all sat together and they said, we've made it through understanding what our resources are. We understand how we need to allocate them. We understand how we need to course correct to get everybody back on track when they deviate from our expectations, or we've aligned on what our expectations should be and look like so we can communicate those more effectively. But now we're sitting with a bit of a problem. And this problem or point of friction is that they had one team member who is incredibly talented, has the world of potential, but cannot seem to meet expectations in terms of behavior, in terms of motivation. As you can see from the image, again, this is meant to portray this individual. The account manager shows up and is just not motivated to go above and beyond, let alone to meet expectations. And you can imagine how this really can irk the three members that we have in our cohort currently, because they're saying, we know that this person is so very talented. We know that they're invested in this industry. What are we doing wrong? So in our session, we took time to explore what they had already tried to motivate this individual, their account manager. They said that they tried to motivate her with more autonomy and more responsibility. That didn't work. They tried to offer the opportunity for more creativity. So maybe more creative work, attach her creativity to the impact. She wasn't biting with that. They tried to provide her with mentorship for marketing so she could understand the whole picture and see how the account management went into that creative piece. She didn't really take them up on that. And then they shared the information about the impact of her client relationship management and account management and how that tied into the overall vision of the organization. And yet day after day, she would show up unenthused. She would do her work and do her work very well, but there was still an underlying semblance of just demotivation. The end of the day, she packed up at 5 o'clock on the dot, left, and wanted to be at home. So they were saying, we've tried everything. We've exhausted all angles. And in this conversation, we said, well, what are the assumptions that you're making about this individual and what they're motivated by? And they said that they assumed she was motivated by the cause and the work they were doing because they're very impact driven. There are a lot of heart driven individuals in their industry. They thought and assumed that her potential wasn't being utilized. And if they could recognize that, she certainly could recognize that as well. And they assumed that in a matter of time, she would leave, and she would leave to a place where she had more creative freedom or a different environment. So rather than saying, you know what, you're probably right, we said, let's go back a step and let's observe her behaviors and think about what it is that she says day to day. What are the things that excite her? What seem to be her natural motivation boosters, let's say, or enhancers? So through this conversation, they started to unpack that even though they were trying to motivate her in one way, and even though she seemed demotivated, what lit her up was when she was able to talk about things like the client's gifts that they provide at Christmas. She said she loved them. They send the best gifts. She loved working with the high ticket clients and really emphasized the price tag on the invoice of those clients. She talked about how high a contract was and that she had single-handedly secured and executed one of the biggest contracts in company history. And that was something that excited her, that lit her up, and that she talked about with the rest of the team for quite a few months through the duration. She took pride in that. Now, in looking at this, you might be able to say, okay, we can see some discrepancies between what was said and what she says, right? So we're going to dive into how we rectified this problem. First of all, we had already completed 3 modules of our Spark training. So we looked at our resource management, as I mentioned, we looked at feedback responsiveness, and in this acknowledgement session, our motivation for excellence, we said, let's take this information we've observed, we've listened, we've dissected what we believe and what we perceive to be one of her critical motivators, which isn't the impact of the work, but it's the financial impact of the work. Now, let's take our Spark assessment results and let's see if the data matches up. And what we uncovered with Company X was that the CEO and COO, the folks who this account manager worked most closely with, were both incredibly heart-driven. So they were motivated by these pieces of recognition, by more responsibility, by the impact of the work. The CFO, who didn't have too much interaction with the account manager, in this moment when we showed this chart, completely understood where the account manager was coming from and was able to offer some of his insight in the session to say, I get maybe why she's not motivated because of the way that the two of you were motivated and some of the tactics we've used. And in looking at the account manager's results, you can see that the data shows she is in fact incredibly monetarily driven. So we had both her basic communication and the things she said, and the data to show that she had a different motivation style than the other two that she worked most closely with. So we essentially unpacked what this means for them and how they could use their most basic communication rather than having to break the bank to motivate this account manager. So when we look at our heart-driven and monetarily driven individuals, we're looking at their motivation for excellence. So to meet and exceed expectations. This comes in 2 parts. It's both our internal drive and our external drive to essentially achieve success. So we took a step back, dissected that. And in looking at organizations as a whole, right, we have our heart-driven individuals and our monetarily driven individuals. And as I mentioned earlier on, these ways of being motivated can change based on experience, based on the role, based on the season of life we're in. But typically, we notice that when we have heart-driven individuals, their motivation is higher going into a role with a lower salary, and their motivation only incrementally increases as their salary increases. I want to put the caveat out there that nobody's going to say no to money, but this isn't the thing that drives them or compels them to want to go above and beyond. You can see from this graph that our monetarily driven individuals might come in with a lower drive and lower motivation at a lower salary, but quickly their motivation increases based on their salary increase. There's a monetary threshold that exists for both monetarily driven and heart-driven individuals. However, mostly our heart-driven individuals can feel this monetary threshold where at the end of the day, it's not the money that makes them show up to work every single day. For different folks, this monetary threshold might come sooner than what we have depicted on the graph here. It really depends on that individual, and that's why it's important to look at these deficits and differences and make sure that we're communicating and motivating each individual based on their individual motivation style. And I will say individual one more time, because it's really important to personalize how we're incentivizing, how we're acknowledging, and how we're recognizing folks. Now you might be saying, okay, Kendra, that's great. So to motivate our monetarily driven folks, that means I have to give them a $10,000 raise. But that's not what I'm saying at all. So we're going to get into a couple of different tactics and ways that you don't need to necessarily increase the salary to motivate these individuals. And we can use just the basic way in which we interact and communicate with them every single day. For our heart-driven individuals, for example, we can motivate them by recognizing their work, using small gifts or acts of appreciation, giving them their time back, taking something off their plate, and highlighting this impact-driven work. We can also promote them for status and responsibility, and if there's a salary attached to that, that's wonderful. But that's what these folks really strive for. Now, we get into in our Spark training ways that we can actually flip the script, and we provide you with scripts and tools and techniques you can use to communicate. But in looking at the other side of the coin, no pun intended, we look at what motivates our monetarily driven individuals. So naturally, financial rewards would be one. Promotions with a financial increase, or at least talking about what that next salary band looks like. Anything that has a dollar amount attached to it. But more than that, we're looking at talking about the financial impact, whether that's saving the company money or gaining the company money, that these folks are providing. So they take great pride in the way that they show up every single day, and they contribute financially to the organization's health. You remember, we looked at our CEO and COO, who were very heart-driven. Our CFO and account manager are monetarily driven. So in wrapping up our acknowledgement session with this team, we said, what are the next steps here so that we can make sure you're walking away and able to motivate this account manager to show up to work every single day, to feel fulfilled, and really start to speak her language, right? So we focused on 3 things. The first was that they shared important financial goals with her that related directly to her role. So rather than the impact of the work, something like you've been able to manage 5 campaigns, they said you've brought in X amount of dollars from each of these campaigns, from all of these 5 campaigns. So that was just a subtle shift in the way that they communicated, but that showed that the resources that this account manager valued most were being recognized and acknowledged. She found motivation in that. The second piece, which is a perfect segue, emphasizes how her contributions every single day, managing the accounts, keeping their clients happy, showing up, and being an exceptional employee when she was executing and doing that client work, contributed to the overall financial health of the business. So, for example, they recognized her both privately and publicly for closing and working on the biggest client to date. They said, this is what we've achieved so far. What can we do next? What's the next client we're going after? So then they gave her a new goal to strive for that made her want to do more, if you remember the third piece that we talked about there. So they discussed what getting to that next salary bracket would look like for her, but more importantly, how that next salary bracket was also depended on her doing more and exceeding expectations to beat her past record of working on and closing the biggest client deal to date. What does that next client deal look like? So in essence, they took these three barriers, let's say, and they solved for each one of those simply through communicating effectively and communicating with the other person's motivation style in mind. Now, this individual has shown up. They are more motivated, they're more engaged, but this doesn't happen overnight, right? This is something that needs to continuously be worked on. And once we have that connection and we build that rapport and understand that we've connected based on motivation style, that motivation will continue to incrementally, or exponentially, I should say, not incrementally, exponentially increase. Now, we've taken this information, and if you took our Spark assessment already, we have a little snippet available. So you would have received something like this that went back to our first part on managing resources and understanding our resource management style. But we offer a full flushed out 17-page report based on all of our 5 personality partners that talk about our working style, our communication style, and our essentially our collaborative style. So this is just a snippet if you took our part 1 small piece of the Spark assessment, but the full flushed out assessment talks about the ways in which we can use our basic communication to motivate each of those personality partners whether they are monetarily driven or heart driven. Now, we do this in two different ways with our clients, and if you'll bear with me, we do it both through our Spark Incubator session, which is a cohort-based 7-week program for individuals who want to take control of their own learning and development. So this is for leaders from different organizations to come together, to network, to learn, and to understand how different leaders communicate in different ways. On the right-hand side here, you'll see our Spark Team Training, which is a longer, more fleshed out version of our Spark Incubator. And that is a cohort-based team training that focuses more on collaborative learning for an organization, diving into their vision, their values, the ways in which we action our values, and we set expectations with all of these performances with the organizational culture in mind. So just some quick information about our Spark Incubator, because it is coming up and launching on April 30th with only 4 spots left. Over the course of 7 weeks, we'll be meeting weekly for 2 hours. You'll get a full Spark assessment, the comprehensive understanding of different working styles, your own, and then we talk about how that applies outwardly to the rest of your team. You'll receive practical tips and strategies to be able to motivate others, and to also motivate yourself, but also improve the communication that you have with your team so that you can show up as an influential and impactful leader. We use case studies and success stories from industry experts and also from our past alumni who can say with certainty that they saw success by following our Spark program. And then we also give you interactive modules to be able to engage and practice the skills and tools that we learn in session. So you can take those things away, and when you go out into the wild, you've already trialed them. We're able to give feedback, both our facilitators and your peers in the cohort, so you feel more comfortable and confident executing these tools when you leave the training. Enrollment's open, so please feel free to join or to email connect@bengroup.com if you're interested in receiving some more information. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, open the floor up for any questions. And as always, we do practice what we preach, and we truly, truly appreciate any feedback that you have and any key takeaways from today's session. So please feel free to scan this QR code. The survey takes 3 minutes, and that's if you have to think really hard. So it shouldn't take more than 90 seconds, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated.